the replay queen, I will more than likely not be looking at the comments and I'll only be live for a little moment. I do ask that when you do catch the replay that you hit the like button because I will appreciate it tremendously. I really will. Here we go. Shortly after 6 p.m. on April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and mortally wounded as he stood on the second floor balcony outside his room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was pronounced deceased at 7:05 p.m. at St. Joseph Hospital. James Earl Ray, a 40-year-old convicted armed robber who had escaped from the Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City, Missouri on April 23, 1967, pleaded guilty on March 10, 1969 in Shelby County, Tennessee, criminal court to the first-degree murder of Dr. King. He was sentenced to 99 years at the state penitentiary. In March 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. traveled to Memphis, Tennessee to lead a march in support of striking sanitation workers. The march was disrupted by violence and ended in a riot. Dr. King returned to Memphis on April 3rd, 1968, in an attempt to demonstrate that a peaceful march could succeed in achieving desired social and economic goals. Dr. King and his party were staying at the Lorraine Motel, a black owned establishment near the waterfront area of Memphis. Dr. King was sharing room 306 with his associate, Dr. Ralph Abernathy, and it was on a balcony in front of that room at 6:01 p.m. on April 4th, 1968, that Dr. King was struck by a bullet and mortally wounded. Shortly after Dr. King was pronounced deceased, his body was taken from St. Joseph Hospital to Gaston Hospital, where an autopsy was performed by Dr. Jerry T. Francisco, the Shelby County medical examiner. He concluded that Dr. King's death was the result of a single gunshot wound to the chin and neck, with a total transaction of the lower cervical and upper thoracic spinal cord and other structures of the neck. Following the submission of Dr. Francisco's report, questions were raised by critics of the investigation about the thoroughness of the report and the procedures that were followed. These included questions about whether Dr. Francisco properly traced the path of the bullet through Dr. King's body and performed all the normal procedures of a complete autopsy. To resolve issues raised by the autopsy, the committee retained a panel of three noted forensic pathologists to review the medical evidence pertaining to the assassination of Dr. King. The panel examined all available relevant evidence, including clothing worn by Dr. King at the time of his death, bullet fragments recovered from his body, photographs and slides taken during the course of the autopsy, and microscopic slides and tissue blocks from the autopsy and neuropathology study. The panel also reviewed the report of the committee's firearms panel, as well as x rays, medical reports, notes, and documents submitted by physicians who treated Dr. King. The forensic pathology panel traveled to Memphis to view the crime scene and meet with Dr. Francisco and the physicians who treated Dr. King at St. Joseph Hospital. The panel determined that Dr. Francisco had not dissected the path of the bullet during the autopsy. Dr. Michael Baden, chief medical examiner for New York City and spokesman for the five autopsy panel, testified that this decision resulted entirely from Dr. Francisco's concerns about not causing any unnecessary deformity to the body and his sensitivity to the treatment of the dead. Dr. Baden also noted, however, that tracing the bullet track proper at time of the autopsy would have given additional information for questions that might arise later. The panel, however, concluded still, after this information, that the autopsy findings were generally accurate. Dr. Baden testified that Dr. King died as a result of a single gunshot wound caused by a bullet that entered the right side of the face, approximately an inch to the right and a half inch below the mouth. The bullet fractured Dr. King's jaw, exited the lower part of his face, and re entered his body through his neck. It then severed numerous vital arteries and fractured the spine in several places, causing severe damage to the spinal column and coming to rest on the left side of his back. The bullet traveled in a downward and rearward from a medical direction. The panel found that the wounds to Dr. King were caused by the bullet recovered from his body. A Remington Peters soft point metal jacketed bullet fired from a distance by a high velocity rifle. Based on the examination of the evidence by the forensic pathology panel, the committee concluded that Dr. King died as a result of one shot fired from in front of him. The shot that killed Dr. King was killed from the bathroom window at the rear of a rooming house at 422 and a half South Street, Memphis, Tennessee. An important issue has always been the location of the assassin at the time the shot was fired. Unfortunately, precise directional and trajectory data could not be obtained in this investigation, although forensic pathology, for two reasons. One, a dissection of the bullet's path was not performed during the autopsy and could not be done at the time of the committee investigation. Two, it was not possible to determine Dr. King's exact position at the time of the shooting, although it's photographic evidence. I'll stop there. And for those that watched and listened on this day, I thank you. Hey, Miss J, good evening, my Tay. Hey, virtuous woman. For those that stopped and listened on this day, let us be mindful that a black man was taken. There's rumors that he was treated poorly in the hospital. There's rumors that he was actually still alive. There's rumors that a pillow was even placed over his face to make sure that the job was done. This is what they thought of us. This is what they thought of a powerful black man. And I think this is what they continue to think about us to this day. Let us be mindful on this day of where we were. Let us be mindful of this day of where we came from. Let us be mindful on this day of what so many fought for. Let us be mindful of this day of how we treat one another. Let us be mindful on this day that a black man was taken. As always, I love you all. Later.